Hello and welcome back once again to the Single Malt Review. Goodness, that's a
small bottle, yeah.
That's a real tiddler we've got here, so it must be a sample. What have you scrounged up?
Well, not too long ago we looked at Jameson's, the obviously legendary Irish whiskey, the Caskmates IPA edition. So it is Jameson's whiskey, which was finished in a Jameson's barrel, which was previously loaned to a craft brewer who matured in India Pale Ale, a very hoppy pale beer in it, which imparted a banquet of new and wondrous flavours to the whiskey. This is not that.
If you've been following along, the IPA cask all but caused me to lose my mind because it transformed Jameson's whiskey into something completely indescribable.
Yeah.
Or if describable, completely unrelatable. It had totally transformed the whiskey, which, depending on how much you like Jameson to begin with, was either a very good or very bad thing. I think Jameson's pretty boring, so I think this mega souped up oaky nonsense version of Jameson's that they created was actually pretty good.
The sample we have here, though, this is also from the Caskmates series. However, this is the Stout Cask edition. What we have is that Jameson's gifted number of casks, or rather, some Jameson's casks were passed on to, let me check my notes, Franciscan Well, who produce a fairly phenomenal Irish stout. Yeah. And they use Jameson's barrels to mature some of their excellent dark beer, and those casks returned to Jameson's, who used them to finish some of their classic Irish whiskey. So it's Jameson's cask, but it's been places and picked up some new characters. Now this, I mentioned at the time, when we reviewed the IPA cask, that I had sampled this previously and indeed reviewed it previously. And that was in fact back in the middle of 2016. I tried was possibly an earlier version of the Caskmates Stout Cask edition. Here are my notes from the time. I'll read this verbatim, it's not long, don't worry. What happens when whiskey and beer join forces? Jameson's new Caskmates Stout edition is one way to find out. Most Irish whiskey is matured in bourbon or sherry casks. Irish craft brewery Franciscan Well borrowed some empty casks from Jameson for a barrel-aged stout. Jameson then took back those beer-seasoned casks to finish some of their whiskey. It's bottled at 40% ABV, and the stout influence is pleasantly rich and strong. Sweet cocoa, tasty chocolate malt, and a splash of espresso nestle around the edges of a dark, warming blend of malt and grain spirit. It's no fine single malt, but it's a novel way to experience craft beer out of its native habitat, rubbing shoulders with its distilled malty cousin.
Well,
so I was writing back from a craft beer perspective, and while that was nearly 3 years ago, the formula has maintained some consistency. It's still 40%, this current bottling, and it's still a cask which was used for Franciscan Well Irish Stout. So, we can expect something quite similar today.
Well, just from nosing it, I can say that this one is, for better or worse, not as balls out bananas as the IPA.
Yeah, the degree of transformation is not as profound.
It is... Well, it is first and foremost identifiable as Jameson's blended Irish malt. I should say blendish Irish whiskey. Did I say blendish?
You did say blendish.
It's very indicative of how many whiskies we are in here, but anyway, you can enjoy that one. At least I caught it.
Yeah. I guess the main difference being, obviously the malt bill was entirely different, but hops, far fewer, possibly no hops for a stout, which is, you have to remove so many chemical elements from the equation.
I almost wonder, see, the thought I had with the IPA cask was that they must have used a almost fresh barrel for it. There was a sort of first fill radicalness to that one, which I thought was very telling. This one, I wonder if they have used some slightly more seasoned casks, which would
take a very deep draw on that, and you get some of those milky, cocoa-y, dark chocolatey notes indicative of stout.
There are certainly some stouty notes on here. It's the lack of... It doesn't have any of that sort of resin, just sort of chewing on sucking an oak stave for all its honey vanilla goodness. This one is a lot more tempered. In many respects, it's a much better whiskey because it hasn't gone so buck wild as the IPA cask. But that said, I haven't even tasted it yet, so we should dig in there.
Ooh, yeah. There is, initially you think, oh, this is Irish whiskey, it tastes good, but it's unremarkable. Then those stout notes start to creep in. First, there's some milk chocolate. Then there's some, say, a flat white coffee. Then there's some rich, roasty coffee beans and dark chocolate. It is, and the finish is just all creamy stout. That's an impressive journey, really.
Yeah, now that I'm actually tasting this, there are some distinct notes of the IPA cask edition. It's very, very oak driven. As much as it is stout driven with the sort of coffee chocolate notes, which are there notably around the periphery, it's that fresh wood which is doing a lot of the work, just as it was in the IPA cask. If anything, were you to cask whiskey in a barrel that had previously held beer, you would expect to get the most sort of oomph out of your stout cask, because hop flavours really don't transmit into whiskey. If you actually got a whiskey that had hop flavours in it, it would probably be kind of bad, because they're not. It's not what you're after.
No, I thought that's what we had with the IPA cask edition.
It was more fresh oak,
right.
I found. Fresh green oak, like sappy, tannic.
Even though it was an ex-Jameson's cask, which was then ex-craft beer. Interesting. Because in this case, I'd figure, well, beer simply isn't going to embed itself as firmly into the wood as a spirit.
No, it certainly isn't, because it A, doesn't spend nearly as long, and B, it's less, it's more dilute kind of thing. Even a strong stout.
Since this is the cask that Jameson's was finished in, not matured in the whole way. But I think in this case, the stout flavours are so much less at odds with the underlying whiskey properties that it's not as such a jarring contradiction as the IPA cask was. That's why it seems so much more subtle. It's more complementary, really. It's transformed the whiskey rather than just challenging it on a fundamental level. And I actually quite like that. It's a Irish whiskey that's been sort of nurtured and nourished by the addition of those stout properties. It's
in both cases, it's Jameson's seen through such a immensely distorted lens that, again, depending on your opinion of Jameson's, and I think Jameson's is a bit pedestrian in its normal incarnation, I think this is, again, a radically improved version. It is just slightly more conventionally improved, I think. It hasn't gone quite so, as I say, quite so buck wild as the IPA version had. That had flavours that just had no business being in an Irish whiskey of any kind. It was just so profoundly altered. This one, if you'd given that to me in a blind tasting, I still probably would have completely missed this with Jameson's. It's very, very significantly altered. It is still more akin to whiskey than the absolute Doctor Who Christmas special that was the IPA cask. That one was just so radical. It was only my love of danger whiskey that really made me love it. Otherwise, I would have just been sort of the mind of, what have you given me? Have you added just juice to my beverage kind of thing? This is a bit more tangible in that you can kind of see the roots, and you can kind of see how a stout, and of course I'm not familiar with the producer of the stout. There is more than one type of stout out there. There's sort of the traditional Irish stout, aka Guinness, which is actually very, very dry and doesn't contain a lot of these sort of malty, sweet overtones. What did you say the name of the...
Franciscan Well.
Franciscan Well. We really have to rustle up one of those bottles and open it on camera just to bring this all the way home. I have never tasted one of their beers, but if it was stout enough to finish a whiskey in, I think it might have had a bit more going for it than regular Guinness. Right. Not that that sees a cask in its life, but I think we might be dealing with...
We have the advantage of living in craft beer country. We get some truly world-class craft beers here, including, increasingly, whiskey barrel matured dark beers, and they are almost, without fault, without exception, an absolute treat. I think that's what's happened here.
Yeah, I think this is probably a more complete exercise than the IPA cask. That was more of a radical thing, whereas this is more slightly more honed, slightly more down to earth. I will be doing this very fairly because I don't remember the score I gave to the IPA cask, despite enjoying it. So
it was high. We're definitely in the very high 80s, possibly low 90s even.
This one to me is, I think it's probably better. I just don't know if it's going to speak to me in quite the same way, because I am in some ways a whiskey radical when it comes to boring blends. I think this is probably the more well-produced blend, but my score is going to be an 83. What do you think?
I'm going to go a bit higher. The smooth cocoa milkiness just goes so well with those Irish whiskey characters. It transforms it. It takes it in a new direction without just being such a radical, countercultural, punk rock assault to the senses like the IPA cask was. So for me, 87 points.
Yeah, it's in both cases, these are just so much better, at least in our opinion, than regular Jamesons, which of course we haven't reviewed. We probably should.
We've both obviously tried it in the past, but not on camera.
Everyone on the earth has probably tried Jamesons once, even if it was accidentally.
Yeah, but the experimental choice of using an ex-craft beer and thus ex-Jameson's cask to finish that, and the amount of transformation that happens just from that cask finish, it's a good experiment. I'm really glad they tried it. I'm glad we got a chance to sample the outcome as well.
I think, if anything, this shows, both of these editions show just how much room Jameson's whiskey has to grow if it was only given a bit more barrel treatment. I think there's untapped depths there in the otherwise quite unassuming sort of king blended Irish whiskey that Jameson's sort of fronts. I think this shows that there is depths to be plumbed in that sort of Middleton plus grain sort of alchemy that they have there. But whether we will see that in this lifetime, I'm not sure. I don't think Jameson's 40% malt whiskey is going anywhere. Of course, they do age versions. They do a 12-year-old, which I've heard related to cat's urine.
Oh.
But in a good way. So that would be an interesting exercise. Then again, some of our local Sauvignon Blanc is similarly associated. So there you go. Still nowhere near as bad as the Islay tasting notes. So there you go. Anyway, that has been just a little bonus foray there.
And we're 2 for 2 on some quite stunning and transformative outcomes from Jameson's Caskmates series. IPA edition and now Stout edition, both phenomenal successes.
I'm not sure what else they would do. I mean, IPA typically is not casked. I think that's more of an affectation than anything else. Certainly none of the IPAs over in our country ever even see a cask.
Oh, we've had barrel-aged IPA once or twice. It's always been really out there experimental
stuff. We've had some sour ones, yes.
The gin barrel triple IPA we had that one time.
Oh, that's true, that was
gin barrel. I'll call it an experience.
It was indeed. As I hope this has been, before we go into our deep reminiscence of odd beers we tried, we will let you go, and we'll be right back next session. We promise this is the last one, because, goodness me, was there to be another? Dark things would await. Sludger, we will be right back. Catch us next time. This has been the Single Malt Review.